My husband wanted me to stay loyal while he explored being single. I chose myself instead. I always thought my marriage was solid. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but whose is? My husband, Dave, had his flaws. He was a little self-centered at times, a bit too focused on work, but I loved him. Or at least, I thought I did. Everything started unraveling about 6 months ago when his ex-girlfriend, Laura, reached out. At first, it seemed harmless. She'd sent him a message on Facebook, congratulating him on a work promotion he'd posted about. He told me about it casually over dinner, brushing it off like it was no big deal. Just a friendly message, he said. I didn't even reply, but then the messages kept coming. He started mentioning her more often, how she'd just happened to text him about an old mutual friend, how she'd shared photos from their college days, reminiscing about the good old times. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, I trusted him. But something about the way he talked about her made me uneasy. Then, one evening, I came home to find him sitting in the living room, staring at his phone. "What's up?" I asked, setting my bag down. "Laura wants to meet up," he said without looking at me. I froze. "Why?" "She says she wants to catch up. Talk about old times," he replied, his tone too casual. "And you're considering it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I mean, what's the harm?" he said. Against my better judgment, I didn't push back too hard. I didn't want to be the jealous wife, and he made it seem so innocent. "It's just coffee," he said. "It's not like I'm sneaking around," but that one meeting turned into 2, then 3. By the time I found out he'd been having weekly lunches with her, it felt like a betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded one night after finding a message from her on his phone. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said defensively. "Not a big deal? You've been spending more time with her than with me. She's just a friend," he insisted. "You're blowing this out of proportion." Then came the bombshell. One night, after weeks of tension between us, Dave sat me down. "We need to talk," he said, his expression serious. I braced myself. "I've been thinking a lot," he started, "about my life, our marriage, everything. And I feel like I've missed out on something." "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. He took a deep breath. "I never got to live the single life, Grace. I went from dating Laura to marrying you. I've never had the chance to just be free." I stared at him, stunned. "What exactly are you saying?" "I think we should take a break," he said. "I need some time to figure things out." My heart dropped. "A break?" I repeated. "You're asking for a break." "Just for a while," he said quickly. "It doesn't mean I don't love you. I need to know what I want." "And what about me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Am I supposed to just sit here and wait while you figure out if you still want to be married?" He hesitated. "I mean, yeah, I'd hope you'd stay faithful, at least." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He wanted me to be the dutiful wife while he played the field. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my anger bubbling over. "It's not like that," he said defensively. "I just need some space." That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't have a plan when I left that night. I just threw some clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed my car keys, and drove. I ended up at my best friend Rachel's apartment, standing on her doorstep at nearly midnight. She opened the door, her face a mix of concern and confusion. "Grace? What's going on?" I stepped inside, trying to hold back tears. "It's Dave," I said, my voice breaking. "He told me he wants a break." Rachel's eyes widened. "What? Why?" I sat on her couch, the words spilling out. How he'd been meeting up with Laura. How he said he felt like he'd missed out on being single. How he expected me to stay faithful while he figured out what he wanted. By the time I finished, Rachel was pacing the room, shaking her head. "That's not a break, Grace," she said. "That's him wanting permission to cheat without consequences." Hearing it out loud made my stomach churn. Was that really what he wanted? "He's been different since Laura came back," I said, more to myself than to Rachel. It's like she's in his head, making him question everything. Rachel sat down next to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. Grace, you deserve better than this. If he can't see that, then maybe you're better off without him. The next few days were a blur. I stayed with Rachel, trying to figure out what to do next. Dave called and texted constantly, alternating between apologizing and justifying himself. Dave, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just need some space. Dave, please come home. We can work this out. Dave, you're being so dramatic. It's not like I asked for a divorce. I ignored most of his messages, but one caught my eye. Dave, we need to talk. I have something to tell you. I didn't know what to expect, but I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near our house. When I walked in, he was already there, nursing a cup of coffee and looking like he hadn't slept in days. Grace, he said, standing up as I approached. I didn't sit down. What do you want, Dave? He sighed, gesturing to the chair across from him. Can we just talk? Reluctantly, I sat down, crossing my arms. Talk, then. He ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. I haven't been honest with you, he said finally. No kidding, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He flinched, but continued. She's been saying things. Stuff about how I settled down too soon, how I could have done more with my life if I hadn't gotten married so young. And you believed her? I asked, my voice rising. It's not that simple, he said defensively. She made me think about things I hadn't thought about before, like what I really want. I shook my head, incredulous. So you're throwing away our marriage because of what your ex said? Do you even hear yourself, Dave? He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. I don't want to throw it away, he said, his voice pleading. I just need time to figure things out. And you thought the best way to do that was to ask for a break, so you could play the field. I shot back. It's not like that, he insisted. Then what is it, Dave? I demanded, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you want all the benefits of being married without any of the responsibility. He hesitated, and for a moment, I thought he might admit it. But instead, he said something that made my blood run cold. Laura thinks we should spend some time apart, he said quietly. I froze. Laura thinks? You're letting her decide what's best for our marriage now. It's not like that, he said quickly. She's been through this kind of thing before, and I cut him off, standing up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. I'm done, I said, my voice shaking. If you care more about what Laura thinks than what I feel, then there's nothing left to talk about. Grace, wait, he started, but I was already walking away. Back at Rachel's apartment, I told her everything. I can't believe him, I said, pacing the living room. He's letting his ex dictate our marriage. Rachel looked furious. That's because he doesn't respect you, Grace. If he did, he wouldn't even be entertaining her opinions. She was right. Deep down, I knew she was right, but it didn't make it hurt any less. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for Dave to decide if I was good enough for him. I deserved better than that. I called him and told him I wanted a divorce. He was silent for a long time before finally saying, if that's what you want. No, Dave, I said firmly. It's what you wanted the moment you put Laura's opinions above our marriage. The first week after I told Dave I wanted a divorce felt surreal. I'd packed a few essentials and stayed at Rachel's place, avoiding the house that no longer felt like home. It was hard not to dwell on the past. Every message from Dave only made it harder. Dave, are you sure this is what you want? Dave, I'm sorry, Grace. I didn't mean for it to end like this. Dave, we can still fix this if you just talk to me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The moment I decided to leave, I promised myself that I wouldn't let him pull me back into the chaos he'd created. I started looking for a new apartment. It felt strange, exciting, and terrifying at the same time. Rachel came with me to viewings, offering advice and moral support. "You're doing the right thing," she said as we toured a tiny but cozy one-bedroom unit. "You deserve to feel like yourself again." She was right. The Grace I'd been in my marriage wasn't the Grace I wanted to be. I'd spent so much time trying to accommodate Dave, his work schedule, his moods, his insecurities, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to focus on my own needs. By the end of the week, I'd signed a lease. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Moving out of the house was bittersweet. I waited until I knew Dave would be at work, then Rachel and I packed up my things. I took what was mine and left the rest, not wanting to argue over furniture or decorations. As I walked through the empty rooms one last time, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. This house was supposed to be where we built our future together. Instead, it became a reminder of everything we'd lost. Rachel must have noticed my hesitation because she put a hand on my shoulder. "Let's go," she said gently. "There's nothing left for you here." She was right. The first night in my new apartment was quiet and strange. I sat on the floor with takeout containers and a cheap bottle of wine, surrounded by boxes I wasn't ready to unpack yet. For the first time in years, I felt free. It wasn't an easy kind of freedom. There were moments when the loneliness crept in, when I missed the familiarity of my old life. But there was also a sense of relief, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to fight for someone who wasn't willing to fight for me. A few weeks later, I got a call from Dave. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. "What is it, Dave?" I asked, my voice neutral. I wanted to apologize," he said, "for everything." I sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" "For not being the husband you deserved," he said. "For letting Laura get in my head. For pushing you away." His voice sounded genuine, but I couldn't tell if it was regret or just guilt talking. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but it doesn't change anything." "I know," he said quietly. "I just needed you to know that I'm sorry." After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe he'd finally realized the gravity of what he'd done, but another part of me knew it didn't matter. An apology couldn't undo the damage. It couldn't erase the months of feeling like I wasn't enough, or the betrayal of him valuing Laura's opinions over mine. Over time, I started to find myself again. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned during my marriage. Painting, hiking, even joining a book club. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd lost touch with because I was too busy trying to make my marriage work. Rachel was my rock through it all, always reminding me of my worth. "You don't need anyone's approval to be happy," she'd say. "Not Dave's, not Laura's, not anyone's." She was right. One day, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post from Laura. She and Dave were tagged in a group photo, smiling at some casual gathering. My stomach twisted for a moment, but then I realized something. I didn't care. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't jealous. They could have each other. That night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I'd spent so long trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect partner. But now I understood that I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be me. A few months after moving into my new apartment, life started to feel normal again, or at least a new version of normal. I had a routine. Work during the day, hobbies in the evening, and weekends spent exploring the city or meeting up with Rachel and my book club. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly putting someone else's needs before my own. I didn't realize how much I'd lost myself during my marriage until I started finding pieces of myself again. One afternoon, I got an email from Dave. It was long, longer than anything he'd ever written to me while we were together. He talked about how much he regretted what happened, how he'd let his insecurities and Laura's influence cloud his judgment. He said he was in therapy now, working on himself, and that he hoped I was doing well. "I'll always care about you," Grace, he wrote. "I just wish I'd realized what I had before it was too late." I read the email twice. then closed it without replying. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate the sentiment. I did, but I'd already moved on. Dave's realizations and regrets were his to carry. They weren't mine to fix. It was strange to think about how much had changed in such a short time. A year ago, I would have done anything to save my marriage. Now, I couldn't imagine going back. One evening, Rachel and I went out for drinks to celebrate her birthday. We were sitting at a cozy little bar, laughing about something ridiculous, when a man approached our table. He introduced himself, Ben, and asked if he could buy us a round. I wasn't interested in dating yet, but there was something about his easy smile and warm demeanor that made me relax. He didn't pressure me or try to flirt aggressively. We just talked about books, travel, our favorite local spots. By the end of the night, I felt lighter than I had in years. Ben and I exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks, we started talking more. I told him about my divorce, about how I was focusing on myself and not looking for anything serious. He respected that, never pushing for more than I was willing to give. It wasn't love at first sight or some whirlwind romance. It was slow and steady, built on mutual respect and understanding. One day, as we sat together in the park, Ben asked me a question that caught me off guard. "What's the best thing you've done for yourself this year?" I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. Leaving my marriage. He didn't flinch or ask invasive questions. He just nodded. That takes courage. It did. And for the first time, I felt proud of myself for it. Looking back, I can't believe how much I let myself settle. How much I gave without ever asking for anything in return. But leaving Dave wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about choosing myself for the first time in years. Now, I wake up every day grateful for the life I've built. It's not perfect, but it's mine. And as for Dave and Laura, I don't know what happened to them and I don't care. They're part of my past, a past that no longer defines me. This is my life now and I'm finally living it on my own terms.